Hi everyone, I'm Cornelius of Voice Studio East, and I'm here today with Gregory West, a colleague and friend who's here to share some of his thoughts on resonance. Hi Gregory, glad to have you
Hi,
here.
thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
So, how do you approach resonance? How do you think about resonance in your own singing?
Um, so I usually say a phrase pretty often, um, the power of the vowel, which really means the
Ah,
power of the vocal tract shape. When
yes,
you
yes.
and it's better to think of it that way, but power of the vowel sounds kind of simple and neat, and it's nice.
Yeah,
But yeah,
it
I
almost
think
rhymes too.
power of the vowel.
Power
Yeah,
and
it's
vowel. We just said to the
power
power,
vowel. Yeah,
power
yeah.
of the vowel.
Yeah, you're right. You're
It's
right,
close to
almost.
rhyming.
Yep. So I think that basically I'm looking in my singing for when I want to increase the efficiency, by which I mean I want to spend less energy and use like less physical force, which usually means less breath pressure. When I want to do less of that and get more sound, so more
Right.
volume, um, or I want to get a character in the sound that's fuller. It may not be about volume, but I want to get a certain kind of fullness to my voice. I think about how can I maximize the efficiency? How can I accomplish that with less force, which is that force is usually just relating to breath pressure. How do I use less breath pressure and get more sound, or how do I use the same breath pressure and just get more sound? So more bang for my buck, basically.
Right. So, concerning the sound, basically,
Mm.
in essence, it's so. How do you suppose you wanted to achieve a fuller sound,
Mm.
like you were talking about? How would you typically go about? Could you give an example of a of if a sound you want to make fuller, and then how to make it fuller?
Yeah. So um, I could, for example, take a really easy example that I don't think anybody would do, just to really drive the point home.
Right.
This somebody might do it, but so let's say I take, for example, um, an ooh, a really close ooh, like ooh, and that's pretty quiet in the room. It's not loud, and so
Right.
a really simple step to do, and that may be the way that I would articulate an ooh low. So maybe it's not that silly of a thing to think about somebody attempting, because ooh would kind of work with that shape if I
Yeah.
were low in my range. But
Yeah.
ooh is just like the last way I want to make ooh up high.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
and I can put a lot of force, a lot of breath pressure, and try to up the energy, but it doesn't really go much further
Right.
than where I am right now.
You will just
So
sort of get more effortful with that, really.
yes, I will. So I will open my mouth.
Yeah.
That's going to be the first thing that I do, and I'm going to be basically raising my first resonance to get up out of, I guess, this, I don't know what we would call it, super closed timbre.
Right. Yeah.
Where my first resonance is below my first harmonic. So
Yeah.
I want to shape it more open, and I look at that like basically trying to make my closed vowel as open as I can to get it as
Yeah.
close to open as I could. So I may do that vowel with a shape that looks like it would be an O, and certainly would maybe be an O lower in my range. So I would go from ooh to ooh, and then I would get a lot louder, and it actually
Yeah.
feels easier.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I might do that, for example.
Would it be fair to say then that as you go up in pitch, you will generally open the vowel a lot, open the sound?
I would say yes, I definitely open, like physically I open. I'm not
Yes.
sure that I am opening the vowel more. It may just be a physical opening to not close, to not
Right.
get
Right.
too
So
closed.
yeah, yeah. It depends on like, are we hearing vowels in terms of like absolute resonant frequencies or more
Right.
a relative thing relative to pitch.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
So relative to pitch, I would say I'm not trying to necessarily open more than what I do lower, but yeah, in an absolute sense, I'm for sure. I am trying to raise my resonances as I go
the thing
up.
you were talking about, where the first formant drops below the first harmonic, and it sort of often loses a lot of. It becomes hard to produce. It loses a lot of efficiency. It may also lose a lot of warmth or something. I often feel like it gets sort of bitten off. I think of that as being bitten off. Do you like?
Okay.
Does that seem relatable? Like, especially on an E vowel, maybe if it's a bit toothy, right? I'll be doing like E. Right? It's sort of it's like, well, I wouldn't do that. But if I did that, it would be sort of bitten off. E.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah. Because I bitten off makes sense because when you bite, you close your mouth. So and keeping the mouth closed is how we're doing those.
Yeah. So this reminds me of there are a couple of songs that have some dramatic high note on an E vowel or an U vowel, right? And a lot of singers will change that to an E, right? And and sometimes they will get a lot of criticism for this. There's a in Music of the Night from Phantom of the Opera. There's the Let Your Soul Take You Where You Long to Be. And
right, on the G sharp.
Right, and then Never Enough. There's For Me, Never Enough from The Greatest Showman. There's like the For Me, where she goes For Me on the high note. So is this something you find yourself doing a lot?
Not terribly a lot, because I don't like it too much. I guess it depends on the context. It depends on the genre.
I agree. I would do it in Never Enough, but I would never do it in Music of the Night.
Yes. And Never Enough, I accept it. I'm like, all right, that's the style here. That's what we're going for. Like, cool. Yeah. As long as if you do that and then you stick the landing, like you open it and you have, that really full character, and it works well and you stay in tune and stuff, like, then it sounds amazing. I'm like, yeah, great. It's like a trade-off. And I accept it, but then if it's Music of the Night, it just sounds contextually off. It would be like using, it would be a bit like using like distortion or something in Music of the Night.
Like the word itself. It's like people have made this modification so many times with the word me that we sort of accept that me can also be me.
Right? Maybe.
There are even some dialects where people do that in speech, right? So it's sort of like, it's like,
true.
Doesn't seem all that wrong, but nobody does that with the word be, right?
True.
To be.
True.
So that's...
Yeah, I mean, like I'm much more. Yeah, I mean, and probably the dialect component is a part of what shapes certain genres to have certain sounds, that are acceptable. Like country, for example, they will tend to just open a lot of vowels, and like especially they'll be opening vowels a lot more to and then I'll be like, that's okay here, but then somehow in a pop context, I'm like, no, it's not okay. Like, stop it.
Right. Yeah. So, it's like there are these weird like similarities between there are a lot of genres where you're allowed to really go quite far.
Right.
Deviate quite far in terms of diction. Right. Really change the vowels a lot. And then there's, in classical we don't want that, and in pop we also often don't really want that. So it's like this is like a peculiar similarity between pop and classical almost. It's like
it is.
a lot of
it is. It is. It's a peculiar. They share that common element. But there's other ones in pop, like in pop, it becomes acceptable to close a vowel where it should be open. But I mean, it's the sort of like by this like indie direction, with the voice
where everything becomes a diphthong and it goes towards it.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yes,
that kind of. I saw a hilarious parody of that. I forget what it was called.
Just as an example, there's a super maybe it's the one you're talking about, but there's a famous Vine. I don't know if it's famous anymore, but it was famous back in the day of Vine, by Krish, and he did. Okay, that's what you're talking about. Yeah. So it's just.
Welcome to my kitchen. We have bananas and avocado.
we've been talking a bit about how you use resonance in your own singing, including these like vowel modifications, sometimes technical, sometimes stylistic. How about in your teaching? How do you approach it in your teaching?
So I usually will say power of the vowel, and then I will explain that it's really power of the vocal tract, and that it really matters like where you put stuff. You can't just you can't just think, okay, as long as I have the right breath pressure and then I'm just like closing my vocal folds, I can do any shape. It's like that's just wrong. It's immediately wrong as soon as you try to do the ooh that I showed in the beginning. Like it's completely clear. And if you have that sort of proprioceptive feedback of knowing when your voice transitions and feels like I left my modal register, now I've gone into falsetto, or if you can detect that, you'll really feel that you have a hard time maintaining I would say the full thickness and degree of your vocal fold closure when you go higher. It's not going to stay the same. You'll feel so that might still be modal, but it's not as nearly as much as if I like it just, now it's more, and I can feel the difference inside to some extent, where it just feels like it has to let go. And so I kind of think of that as, basically being shape dependent. The way that I often like to train that is in falsetto. So there's two things I like to do in falsetto. First, it's whoop. And so to just find any loud falsetto on a whoop. So at any range. So if they can just cheer and be like, woo, at a game. And a lot of people don't realize how that's what sopranos are doing. I remember I told a friend, I was like, well, I'm not impressed by soprano singing, And he was like, why not? I was like, I don't know. It's just like yelling in your falsetto. and I told him that. He was like, what are you talking about? I was like, well, you just like take that cheer, woo! And then you just put vibrato, woo! And then you sound.
A lot of them will do it in a twanged variety to make the high notes easier. That makes it a bit more impressive, because it's not quite instinctual to do a twanged whoop.
That's true. That's true.
But it's simple.
And it also depends on the part of their range, right, that they're in. Where they do what.
It's true. The soprano registration is pretty simple compared to the tenor.
In other words, us tenors are better. Now I'm going to start a war in the comments.
It's funny you talk about it yelling in relation to yelling in falsetto. Actually, I remember when I was learning whoop timbre in falsetto, and I was like learning yell timbre in chest voice, I was working on them in parallel in octaves, and it's remarkable just how similar the shapes are for like if you're whooping at like an E flat or something, woo woo, and I just take that shape, woo oh 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 oh, right? It's the same shape.
It's the same shape.
And we've now sort of opened Pandora's box when it comes to these terms like whoop timbre, yell timbre. Do you use these terms in your
I do.
teaching?
I do. I mean, I don't always explain the resonance because sometimes I will, and then people's eyes will just start glossing over. And
you have to fit it to the student.
You had to fit it to the student. So sometimes I will, especially if somebody wants to know. And so sometimes I do that kind of brief crash course of what it is. Sometimes I will bust out voce vista, but I don't think for every single student. I mean, I would just waste so much time. I just look at it like with the students are just trying to get enough of a nugget of information that's going to make a difference in their singing. So if I can just get that across, less is more. And so I try to aim for that, but sometimes it's helpful. Sometimes it's good to be using that. And so, for example, that voce vista could be a really good tool. This doesn't actually have to do with resonance, but you can see, for example, the amplitude of the first harmonic. And so if maybe you go and you change your glottal adduction and suddenly the sound is much tighter and you have way less airflow going through the vocal folds, you see that goes down. And then if you can increase that, airflow, you would see that it gets louder. So it's usually quite loud on a breathy sound, like your first harmonic is quite loud, and then much softer when you go really, really soft, even though other frequencies may be louder in that one.
Yeah.
So that it can be a useful tool for the resonance, but outside of using something like that to see the resonance, I will just make people hear it by striking my larynx. So that's the best one. Yeah, so I just will hold my breath with my vocal folds shut and strike my larynx. And just move it up.
So I did that one in the first of my 3 resonance videos.
Right.
I
saw it.
Striking the larynx. Did you also get that from Ken Bozeman?
I did. I saw that in a video, I think years ago. And I was like, oh, what a cool trick.
That's also the video that inspired me to do it. I've seen like some people when they see it get really uncomfortable. They'll be like, oh my God. They'll be like,
hitting the larynx.
Yeah.
You'll be okay.
Sometimes I'm a little bit sadistic and I'll just like react by doing it a bit harder. But I can understand people being squeamish about their throat, of course. It's,
a lot of people actually just have an aversion to just touching their larynx in general. Yeah. They don't want to even touch it. They don't want to palpitate anywhere on it. I say wiggle it around and people be like, this is the weirdest thing. So, but yeah, I mean, those things can definitely be useful. But yeah, I would say I focus on getting whoop and getting it loud and then being able to take that anywhere. And so finding the distinction from that super closed sound where the first resonance is below. I don't know what we would call that. Super closed timbre. Where the first resonance is below the first harmonic. And so finding that distinction when you open it,
We can call it infraroop. Like
infraroop. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, there we go. So it would be like where right when I open and I can hit the sweet spot, it gets much, much louder. So being able to pitch that, and take that up and down through your range and stay in whoop and make a loud volume with that. I like to do that. And then I like to jump to yell timbre. So I like to try to get people to do it's an octave jump in your resonance. So that's really what you're doing. You're jumping octaves with your resonance, but you're keeping the fundamental, you're keeping the pitch. And I love it when something like that happens because that's a source change that happened without me trying to change the source. And so that's usually exactly what I'm trying to get people to understand is like there can be a byproduct effect of changing it. And I got a lot louder. And the cooler thing was that I got fuller. The sound sounded like it switched back into modal, but I didn't change my breath pressure at all. And so that can be hard for people to wrap their heads around. All the time I see people sort of faking it. They're like, ooh, ah! And I'm like, no, don't change, don't push for it. Don't change anything except the shape. And so I often have to tell people this is falsetto. You have to think of that as falsetto. It needs to feel like falsetto because usually what that means to them is there's a certain type of laryngeal effort that they're maintaining to keep it falsetto versus modal. And if they stay in that laryngeal effort, they don't increase the breath pressure as well because it always goes together. If you start to like squeeze the vocal folds harder together, it's interacting with the breath pressure at the same time. So they'll depending on the person, they may notice both or they may notice one. Oh, I just did more abs there. So for some people, it's don't change anything in your abs. Don't change anything in your breath pressure. Leave it the same. And just imagine you're doing falsetto, but with an open vowel. Just yell in your falsetto. Hey! And usually, if you do it right, it won't come across like falsetto, but it should feel a lot more like falsetto.
So this I believe is your approach to one of your approaches to finding falsetto mix.
Yep.
Yes. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Totally. And I would say that's the more sort of quintessential falsetto mix is like not doing anything on the source level, not trying to find any type of adduction, any type of like feeling of holding on that's different from falsetto, and just let it be the shape. So I can do this with still in closed timbre, not going into open timbre, by just getting out of whoop, and it will kind of take me there. Like we won't process it as falsetto anymore, provided my whoop is sufficiently loud. So if I was doing all of this too quiet, like even if I was in whoop, it just doesn't really do anything. It doesn't really take it anywhere. So I need to have a sort of minimum threshold where now when I open it, it's going to work, because hey still just sounds like falsetto. Opening the mouth is huge, but that only works so high. Like maybe you can get yell timbre like G or maybe G sharp. I'm sure it depends on the person, but you start to hit a wall. And so usually what I'm looking for people to find with the falsetto mix thing is to find narrowing of the oropharynx. And that's the sort of key thing. So yeah, it can be tricky to try to get. I mean, some people just get into it right away. They just hear the sound of the vowel and they know how to move there. But some people, they really have an aversion to to moving in the back of their throat. So I can show in the camera if you want to have that on there. Do you want me to show you?
Sure.
Okay. I must light myself properly. Okay. So and we'll hear the effect of that if I go of that narrowing. And so there needs to be a bit of that. So if I don't do it and I have like, let's say let me go too high, like then as soon as I allow that narrowing to happen, then I can get into, you hear the sound open, and change from so sometimes people will be stuck there. Like, I can't make it more open. It requires to find that narrowing. So I also like that because it's such a low cost way of doing it. If somebody's trying to play around with modal, I find it's like definitely a lot more risky and tiring for somebody just to keep hammering away at it over and over and over again. And so they may get just fatigued a lot faster, messing with their voice. And when we're trying to find something that really doesn't have anything to do with that, it's like not the focus. So I will maybe want to save that stamina for later or something. Then you can, with it's just so cost effective. You find the right thing. Yeah.
Very light sound. I remember you live streamed a lesson with a student where you took actually the modal up in pitch and made it very, very light and so split up. And I think you took it to F sharp, something like and trying to maybe already get a little bit of that narrowing of the oropharynx.
Yeah.
And then you can just sort of slide up, and in the beginning it will crack a bit, but if you slide a couple of times, now it's sort of like it fuses. Right? And so that can be another way. That was very effective for me when I saw that video and tried that.
Yeah.
I had to return to it later. It didn't succeed at first.
I would say, I mean, that's such a key thing that, like, if you can't get it to smooth out, then you will forever be stuck with like a useless party trick, because with like getting into it, because you can crack really easily getting from like and you go, okay, well, like how can I actually use that? Even if that sounds like that higher sound is returning a modal, then you go, well, clearly it's not, because now I'm breaking, and there's a big difference between what I'm doing with my voice lower and what I'm doing up there. So it can just seem like that's just like a fake voice. It's like a trick. And it's really key to have smooth transitions. And to get into it. So yeah, if you don't do that with that sound, then it's not going to go anywhere. You have to develop. You have to figure out, okay, how can I smoothly go between them? Yeah. That's key. And I have a student that started recently, and we would try to go up, in the sort of classic CVT manner of let's just take overdrive higher, and the vowel will consistently just close, at like F. And so, especially for his regional accent, is really hard to think of, And I'm like, no, A, it's not A. And that was really causing.
Have you ever had the opposite happen where people, instead of like the vowel closing, they can't get it quite close enough to be in the other but so I'll be doing like, yo, and they'll be doing like, yo, and it's a little too open. It's like
a little too open.
Oh.
Yeah, I would say a lot less commonly, but yeah, that will sometimes happen. Yeah.
Yeah. I find it quite common, actually. That's interesting. That's less common for you. Okay. Yeah. It's like, but it's especially, it's because I guess like, if the students have trouble like turning the vowel, right? So by turning the vowel, of course, I mean this sort of thing that happens as we go up in pitch often. Which is especially associated with classical, but in pop it will also tend to happen at sufficiently high pitches maybe, where the vowel sort of closes a bit instead of it's more So how do you approach this in your teaching? Like if you have a student who for example has a voice crack, very common problem, has a voice crack whenever they close the vowel.
Right. Yeah. So it's common. I think I often look at that as there's something that needs to happen laryngally that's different. Yeah. And if you can't negotiate, and that takes like, I would say more finesse. And in a way, it's a different kind of skill. You know, it takes a different type of skill to be able to execute that than it does it's a different skill to take the open vowel higher. And to maintain it. And in a way, that's a lot more straightforward to people. Right. Like once you give them permission, in a lot of cases, like, no, it's okay for you to be really loud and to like use copious breath pressure. And like you can go up, like it's going to be okay. Like a lot of people will find that really helpful and successful in the beginning. And a big part of that is just giving yourself permission to like feel increased effort and in various parts of your body, you know, and like be loud and like, don't worry, it's okay to pull chest, you know? So there's usually like, let's say that's your starting point with people. And I think that's definitely a good thing for people to explore that part of their voice and making that work. And then they'll go to a closed vowel and they'll crack. And so I usually don't explain that as like you're doing something wrong with your resonance. I mean, unless it's like the E that you did earlier or the U that I did earlier, this sort of infra whoop, then I won't, like if it's that, then you kind of have to bring it up. But most of the time, it's not so much that, because if you can squeeze adequately, I would say in your larynx, the vowel shouldn't matter that much. It will kind of negate the effect. I mean, it will still matter but it won't matter in the sense that you'll break. Like you'll still be able to find some way to hold on. So if I have that open yelly sound, hey, and then I'm like, okay, so obviously I can do that and take that voice higher. And now I go to like, to E, he. It's like, okay, why am I doing that glorious voice crack? Like what's happening? If you can just find the way to squeeze harder inside your larynx, hey, then you can find something that holds on, you know, whether you like it or not, the sound or something, you'll be able to stay stronger and not break. So I usually look at that as that's a problem of that. Of not being able to finesse it. To me, it seems like when I move away from the beneficial resonance tuning and like I close the vowel, then I sort of have to rely a bit more on a strategy that is to do with like adduction and calculated adduction in my larynx, you know? So I think that's why a lot of times the term cover is kind of associated with stuff like that. Oh, it's like when you cover, you also lighten the voice a bit, you know? Like these things tend to go together. I'm sure it depends on who you talk to and ask, but
the squeezing you talk about that also can like prevent the voice crack. That's also what I was referring to in my latest video when I mentioned that if you don't rely on resonance tuning, then you have to rely on squeezing.
Yeah.
So
for sure. As far as specifically turning over, I like to show just people what the rules are, and then you just kind of deal with that however you can. And so I like for people to understand what moves the resonances. And like, I guess like what the path, what the choices are to close the vowel. And so I will oftentimes just be doing that on the same pitch though. And not on not on movements, but you can do it that way too. You can move and then either not, you can move the pitch and then either not move your body, not change articulation, or move, and it's going to affect what's happening with your resonance tuning, because we're specifically talking about the passaggio. So yeah, I would say a lot of times I think there's something up with the tongue, like people will be keeping the middle of the tongue too high. And then we'll close the vowel so we can get like an A to turn into this like E sound by doing that. And so, yeah, I'll try to get people to do that. And then that's a bit of an active transition. I'm like purposely trying to seek out that position with my tongue to make sure that I don't go open, you know. So the tongue, the mouth, closing and just not saying open. I mean, that's the easiest trick in the world. It's the classic CVT, you know, just seeing through clenched teeth, right? And then you just get and you hear it move in the direction of that which I'm producing that one with my tongue instead. But it sounds really similar, you know. So you can think of, I guess, resonance tuning as how can you get the vowel, the same kind of vowel, but maybe in a different way, you know, the same vowel shade, you know. So both have this in the you know. You're trying to accomplish something similar, but slightly differently. And then there's, it depends. You have to be really high for this, but moving the lips forward, that will close the vowel. So yeah, I guess mouth opening, how forward protruded the lips are. So if I go for this note with my lips narrow, hey, that's about what I'm gonna get. Hey, and I kind of have to. Hey, I have to broaden it a bit to get out of the closed timbre. So, yeah, it's hard. And then nasalization. If you nasalize, you make it really hard. So then it comes in, you know. I guess it boils down to knowing these little itty bits of your vocal tract and like how to successfully move them, and the different combinations you can take, because it's going to affect your resonance, and at certain ranges, it's going to be very important. Like maybe you can get away with nasalizing up to a certain note and still being an open timbre, but like I doubt you can do that on like high C.
Right. So I notice a lot that people who have trouble closing the vowel, often for reasons of the laryngeal coordination they're doing, they might like get very, very pressed if they close the vowel, or they might just crack, right? They will either have this sort of kind of thing happening, or alternatively they'll have like right? What I find is that a lot of them, those are very often the same people who will have trouble finding the yell timbre, who will sort of be stuck a bit more open than that. They'll be like a bit so instead of having like this yo, they'll have this yo, where it's like a little bit off. Yo, it's a bit more instead of
I hate
yeah.
It's probably precisely for that reason. I literally hate like this is all sucks.
Like in general.
I hate the vowel. I hate singing it, trying to go high.
I can take it in so many different directions, right? I can do this with I can like it's so it's not quite right for anything. That's the problem with the R vowel. But it's like it's related enough to several different things that it's almost right for a lot of things.
Right. So like, yeah.
So like it's sort of big dramatic open, or I can do this more like sharp kind of thing. I can do this sort of sobbing right. So it's like I love this vowel. I love it.
Yeah. I get what you mean. Yeah, and it works also quite well for the softer like it's a good vowel for that too. So I like it for those ones, but yeah, I guess I'm looking for when I just am doing a scale on a vowel, I'm usually looking for, if I am doing a scale Usually it's to make it quite full, and then I hate ah for that context.
Right.
And I prefer a. It's my favorite vowel.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. So you were saying, you hear people basically being a little too,
it's
a
like
little too
they're like
open.
They're like holding on to some kind of pressing that's preventing them from like relaxing into that resonance tuning, right? I'm sort of showing them a resonance tuning that hopefully should make it easier, but on some level they're having a little bit of trouble just like relaxing into it. So they'll get like the resonance tuning almost there, and then they'll sort of be a bit stuck and struggle with really getting it. What I'll try sometimes to address that is to have them start in falsetto and then sort of crack out of falsetto. Because that's sort of just to get them out of this mode where everything needs to be very controlled and very sort of
Right.
How do you encounter this in your teaching, and if so, how do you approach it?
Yeah, I do. I counter that a lot. I would say the falsetto mix whoop to yell timbre is perfect to solve that, because then you're not looking at all to sort of save the coordination or achieve a result with laryngeal effort, and that's definitely what's leading to the pressing. Not to say that like any extra laryngeal effort leads there, but that's what's happening. So yeah, that's like the total extreme opposite direction. And I find it so easy if you, let's say you're starting lower and you're not pressing and then you're going higher, it's so easy to subtly start to press. For some people anyway, it's very easy for me. So yeah, that was a game changer to that exercise for me personally, and it works really well for some of my students to find zero press but a change in the sound, and you're like, that's the yell timbre, okay. So I need to aim there, I would say that's good. And then working with high airflow is good, because you can't both press and be very breathy. I mean, Chris Stapleton disagrees. People do it, is what I'm trying to say, and they'll have like a sound, but usually, people have a sense to avoid that. And you will have them, hey, and so if you are going with a really breathy sound like that, you're not squeezing, like, so you're not relying on that, and then the easiest thing that's going to kind of keep your vocal folds vibrating the same way is the shape. And if you hey, that's really what's going to want to happen. So hey, so that will be the only thing that'll save it.
So one thing I notice a lot is a lot of these very, like, taking a resonance tuning very high can often be difficult for people, right? They'll have an okay yell timbre up to like F sharp 4 maybe, and then beyond that they have a lot of trouble, maybe G4, even G sharp 4. But it's like around this, and what I notice when you're doing it is your face gets very animated, right? It's like very, and that's also what I find basically has to happen for the high notes. It's like, even if it's actually fairly soft, like the falsetto mix, it has to be like almost hyperactive in the face.
I would say, I think of that as being slightly related to something else, but that still, I think really, really helps to not break, so I think it definitely helps to not break, but I can kind of deadpan do it too. With this really like dead eyes, I guess, like you're sleepy or tired, hey, hey, and not do it, but that will definitely pull me further to falsetto when I do it that way. And that is, I would look at that as a super advanced skill. I meet, it's very rare that I find somebody that can do that. But putting that energy and that enthusiasm, that kind of helps keep, I would say, the approach a bit more straightforward and simple, that you feel you're pulling up the same thing from the bottom, but now it's just kind of working.
Also, another thing is, in a sort of lower range with this, right? Like to G or something, it's sort of, you can sort of get away with not making all that large movements by just, raising the larynx a lot or something. Right? Right? So it's moderately large, I guess, but we're not there yet, right? And it's like, to get up to the high pitches, people often have to make larger movements than they're comfortable with. Right, and I know you've talked about this, how like people are sort of shy when it comes to
Yeah.
opening their mouth.
Yeah.
I also find they're shy with regards to twang. That's another thing that people are often shy with regards to. So how do you approach this if you have like a student who is like, you need them to open their mouth and it's like they're like opening it a little bit, but they're maybe only opening it a third as much as they need to.
I usually will say, show me your maximum mouth opening silently. And just hold that open. I'd be like the largest mouth opening, like that, and then I kind of know what they can do. But of course, that's with the instruction. Like, it has to be the biggest you can open your mouth. Like, it's not just open. Like, so it's that specific instruction, maximum mouth opening.
Yeah, I've used that one sometimes. And I've sometimes had to repeat it because sometimes I like ask people to show me their maximum mouth opening, and I'll be doing like.
Yeah. Well, and if I see that, I'd be like, are you sure? Like, I'd be like, really? Because I don't think that's your maximum mouth opening. I'd be like, I'm pretty sure you could open it more. So if I see something like that, I'll have to kind of coax that out. And you can always tell sort of the timidity, interpersonally when somebody is doing that versus like, they just like, oh, okay. You can see the demeanor changes.
They'll be like doing this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They'd be like, I don't want to do that. Yeah, totally. So that I know then after seeing that and watching them open their mouth, and then they know. I'm like, you're not anywhere near that. So open your mouth more now on the same note, and let's see what happens. And sometimes people have to. It's kind of uncomfortable to be opening their mouths, and that was definitely the case. I think for me, was like. Opening my mouth a lot, it was like, wow, this is not comfortable to just hold.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. You just get used to it, you you kind of adapt.
It can be difficult for people to sort of, when people are sort of unsure about a coordination, they will tend to sort of like squeeze it a bit. They'll like add a lot of pressing, and that can be sort of counterintuitive to do with a large mouth opening. So there, it can also be difficult because it's like sometimes closing the vowel can be what causes people to crack into falsetto, but sometimes opening things a lot and sort of like letting go a little bit is what causes it, and that can also make people scared. So I find I have to really keep like reiterating that it's okay to crack when they do this.
Right. I think that makes a lot of sense with trying to learn like resonance tuning and to sort of decouple, right, like the laryngeal effort from. And the effects of the laryngeal effort on your registration from the effects of your resonance on your registration, so that you are relying more on the tunings that you're accessing to affect, your voice quality in the end, instead of like shifting something in here or holding on or changing something about your strategy in your larynx. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And the fear of cracking, and people just got to get over that. Yeah, that's a big part of voice training. Is that, I make people do yodels. So that's a big part of what I make people do. Often I want them to be able to do this with the ending in the same pitch yodel. And then to be able to go back and forth on any pitch and to just to sort of freely do it.
This is similar to Manuel Garcia's instructions for how to like blend the registers. It's talking about a lot of yodels. I'm not sure how effective that really is in blending the registers. When I read those, I tried that approach for a long time. It didn't really do much there, but it did sort of make me more comfortable with cracking, and that helped.
Yeah,
but,
I think it's important. And it's especially important in women, for me. I think the yodels are really important in women because a lot of times they will just have smooth transitions for some reason, and they will have a really hard time sometimes knowing.
Folds.
Yeah, exactly. They will have a hard time just knowing. Did I just leave modal? And so then I always say, well, we have to do a test. Like, don't ask me. I don't know, but I will know when you give me some evidence, sufficient evidence. And so you kind of have to do these like tests and learn to do them, so that you can test things. Because lots of times, you do something and you're like, is it that? I don't know. Well, go in the opposite direction.
Yeah, it can be hard to tell with women. It's also when I'm like studying some song, if it's a female singer, it's often like this is Myrtle.
Yeah.
I'll be like watching it 5 times, and I'll be like, yeah, I think this is Myrtle, and I'll be watching it like 10 more times, and I'll be like, I don't know. And then I'll be like watching it 50 times, and I'll just have no clue.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, listen, I gotta get going. I'm a little late for my lesson.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, we've.
No worries. I should have said something.
Yeah. Thanks for joining me, and
this was my pleasure. Okay, it was good seeing you.
Likewise.
All right. Till next time.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
That was my interview with Gregory West, whose YouTube channel can be found in the description. If this video gets enough views, I will do a bonus Q&A where I take questions from the viewers. So if you have anything you want to know more about, be sure to leave a comment below. Stay tuned, remember to like and subscribe for more content, and as always, thanks for watching.